Okay, we're continuing with this book, John Mcdougall, The Doctor Who Fought for You by P. Rogers. We're on chapter 3, Who is the Greatest Doctor? Okay, so starting over here. In private practice hospital, the best doctor is the one who makes the most money for the hospital. When I was in private practice, I started out working as an imaging-guided surgeon, interventional radiologist, and I had a patient with multiple problems, including a cardiac problem. Cardiac problem was a simple one. I had rotated through interventional cardiology during my fellowship at Brigham and Women's Hospital at Harvard, and I figured the private practice cardiologist would quickly, successfully complete the procedure. But he didn't. He screwed up the case, and the patient had a bad outcome. I said to one of my colleagues, "That cardiologist screwed up the case. It was an easy case." My colleague said, "Stop it. You can never criticize cardiology. Cardiology brings more money to this hospital than all the other departments." And I'm like, "Well, the guy you're talking about," he said, "that guy you were talking about, he brings more money to this hospital than anyone else. If hospital administration ever hears you talking about him, they will come after you, not him." And I said, "Oh, so that's how it works in private practice. The best doctor is the one who makes the most money for the hospital." And so I obviously, had been used to research universities. But I had come back to my hometown to help out with my mother's care as well, who was suffering from metastatic cancer. And I sort of missed the university healthcare system. In a university hospital, like a research hospital, the best doctor is the one who publishes the most research papers. And when I first heard of a doctor publishing 100 papers, I was very impressed by that. Okay, then I started hearing of doctors who had published 200 papers, 300 papers, 400 papers, even 500 or more papers. And I was astounded. I'm like, how could somebody do that? What a genius they must be. I can't wait to meet these people. They must be so brilliant. I'll learn from them just being around them. And then I started to meet some of these people. And what I noticed was most of them never had anything interesting to say. And for example, when I was at Northwestern for a while, there was a chairman job opened up, and we went to see the audition lectures of the person's interviewing. One guy was this big shot from Johns Hopkins. He had a resume 50 pages long, and I was excited to see his lecture. And during his lecture, he was just a complete low IQ blowhard. And I'm like, how could this guy have published all these papers but be so dull, so stupid, so narrow-minded, conformist, unoriginal? It was like unbelievable. And then I realized over time that, in a whole 1 hour lecture, he didn't say a single interesting thing. That he was just a sophisticated social skills BS artist. And I started to recognize this pattern. And I remember that my father had told me about this. I remember back to my second year of med school when I had this great professor in pathology, Dr. Kirschenbaum, and he was really clever and he made everything simple, and it was very helpful to me. I was like the best student in my class of 333 in pathology, and he inspired me and motivated and taught me all these subtle, nuanced things that I thought were great. And so I told my dad about this guy. I go, "Dad, this is such a great professor. It's so wonderful. I learned so much from him." And my dad said, "You're going to remember that guy the rest of your life." I said, "Yeah, right, Dad. There's going to be lots of great professors." My dad said, "Nope." He said, "You can count them on your hand, the number of great professors you'll meet in your life if you're lucky." He said, "Most of them are phonies. They just climb the social ladder, the big names." And, of course, I didn't believe my father at that time. I was a medical student cranking through these classes. I was like in awe of these Ivy League textbooks. And, I had a dream someday maybe I could write one of these things. And I ran into more of these so-called research stars, and I kept seeing the same pattern. Almost all of them were just hierarchy, social ladder climbers. They knew how to schmooze. They knew how to make friends with the people in power and move up themselves. And then what would happen is they would get their name on some title, let's say section chief. And then they would force everybody under them in the hierarchy to put their name on all their research papers. So they would get publications just by having their name put on papers. They didn't actually do the work. They didn't actually know anything. And another, here's a typical thing I would run into. I ran into this imaging-guided surgeon, a colleague of mine, a little older than me, who had trained at a famous research university. And so I asked him, I said, "I really, think the textbook from that university where you trained is good. It's the best one in that field." And he goes, "Yeah, thanks." I go, "What do you mean, thanks?" And he says, "I wrote that textbook." And I go, "What do you mean you wrote the textbook? You're a young guy. You would have been just a fellow when that book came out." And he said, "Yep, when he was a fellow, the boss of the fellowship program pressured him to write the book. And he had to do it because he needs a recommendation letter from the guy. And so he wrote the book, and he said, 'You know what? the book's not that good. It only seems good because all the other books in that field suck, but it's really not that good of a book. As I got older and I could read in a more sophisticated way the topics in that field, I knew he was telling the truth. And yet that's a common thing. The big name attending doesn't want to write the book because it's a lot of work and it takes a lot of time. So they just force the fellow to do it. And the fellow doesn't have enough experience. They've only been a few years out of residency, not that long out of med school. So they write this wimpy book where they basically just summarize what's already known, but there's no great insight or sophistication to these books. And there's no improvement. This is not science improving. This is just repeating what's already done. And that's a common way a lot of the conventional textbooks are written. So, I did meet a few geniuses. Usually when you see a genius in a field, there's going to be something weird about them. They're going to be social outcasts. They're going to have poor personal hygiene or something, or some weird traits, nuance, whatever it might be. Not always, but what I'm trying to say is they're often in trouble in their departments. They've often moved from hospital to hospital because they pissed off the boss people at their place. And the reason why a lot of these true innovators are in trouble and the system hates them is because they try to change things. They try to make things better. And if that means losing money, then they're going to be hated by the place they're working for. If you can figure out a cheaper way to do something, the system makes less money, it's going to get pissed off. No one cares about patients. Patients are irrelevant. What they care about is how much money is coming into that department. And for example, I rotated through Massachusetts General, Harvard Hospital. And the bizarre thing was the smartest guy, all the fellows would go, this is the smartest professor. He teaches us so much. This guy's brilliant. He's a great doctor. He's a great imaging guy surgeon. They go, well, he hated the chief and the chief hated him. I'm like, why would you hate that? To me, you have to understand, this is bizarre to me. I'm used to thinking of sports. And in sports, the coach loves his best player, his best athlete. The owner of a sports team loves the best athlete, okay? It's a win-win. It's not like that in academics. And very often, the best people in the department are hated by the people who run the departments. They have like a peer pressure thing. They've got a popularity contest thing going on. There's financial issues. But it's just bizarre. But that was often the case. There's often something outcast about the true great innovators in medicine. Okay, they're seen sometimes as too wild and it's weird, but it's true. So my dad ended up being right. I met a few great teachers, but they were quite rare. And I met a few really great, innovative doctors. They were rare. Met a lot of good ones. Many of the great ones were known, like I said, for being eccentric, more interested in discoveries and inventions than in money. Okay, like I said, too, it was weird to get further down the path in medicine and realize if something was totally stupid and didn't work, no one cared. You just did it because it was the standard. It's more profitable to keep the patient sick than it is to cure them. All that stuff is bizarre, but it's true. You cure a patient and you lose a customer. And no one tracks the outcomes because if they did, somebody would come along with a low-fat vegan diet and get too many cures and not make any money, and that cannot be allowed. Instead, what most Western hospitals do is they focus on productivity. And productivity sounds nice, but it's the idea of pushing the whole healthcare system into like a factory model, a widget model. And basically you're running an assembly line. The patients are the product and you get them through as fast as you can. And really what productivity is about is generating more billing codes. So it pretends to be interested in quality, but it's really interested in money, in quantity, and speeding up the throughput. And every Western hospital has got a bunch of bean counters that are tracking all the productivity, the amount of dollars made by each doctor. And if the doctor doesn't make enough dollars for the day, they're going to put pressure on that doctor to go faster. Okay, so that's it for part one of Who is the Best Doctor.